Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malamit in Highland Park, New Jersey, at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation on Shemen, and joining by my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Sheikh, the Day School of Long Island. We start off with a Sfira, 628 days. We're recording this early this week's Tuesday for Parshat Korach. Hayom 628 Yom Shehem Shana Achat Shmona Chodashim V'Shmona Asar Yamim B'Choshech. 628 days, 1 year it is, 8 months, 18 days of darkness for the hostages. We pray for their return. There are momentous events happening during these days. It's now, I guess, who knows if this name will stick, this 12-day war, the 12-day war. We don't know. We are hopeful that on this day, since the ceasefire began, that it will last. And unfortunately, it began with this tragic loss of life, the murderous missile that hit Beersheba. Beersheba, of course, was one of the more vulnerable cities, and I think the Iranians took advantage of that. They discovered that their missiles were getting through to Beersheba, and the amount of damage, destruction in Beersheba was truly terrible, devastating. But we are hopeful that this ceasefire will last, and we are praying once again for the return of the hostages, that the entire war, of which this was one chapter, will come to its conclusion as soon as possible.
Now,
Um,
one just a quick comment about, we were talking before we started recording about, you know, expectations and planning for the future. In the New Yorker, David Remnick had an article about Bibi Netanyahu and a bunch of other things. He said that in the IDF's military planning, there was a thought there would be much higher civilian casualties. They calculated, according to his sources, that there would be between 800 and 4,000 deaths. And I thought that was just a mind-blowingly large number. Now, of course, there's been like 45 or something like that.
20, 28, 29, I think.
Even with the Beersheba thing,
Yeah.
it's still
Or
only
actually, no, it
29.
would be 32, 32, 20.
So that is a very small number compared to, if that number is correct, the thought that the IDF would begin a a military operation with the expectation that there would be 3.5 times the number of people killed on October 7th. That's
Yeah,
rather
it's
astonishing.
astonishing, and look, it underscores the sense of urgency, the existential threat that is being, part of the calculus of the decision making. But look, for those families, it's of course devastating. But we it's and the people that have lost their homes also, of course, knowing that it could have been many orders of magnitude worse. So we are talking about this week Parshat Korach, which is another chapter in the book of Bamidbar, another chapter in the story, with also some devastating loss, rather violent loss, although it's not at the hands of human violence. But we'll get to that in a second. Um, you know, this Parsha Korah comes at a particular moment in the story of the Israelites in the desert. One could argue that Moses and his leadership was at its lowest point here after the debacle of the spies, the scouts from last week, that having committed the people of Israel to 40 years of wandering in the desert, uh, let's just say if the Gallup poll took a poll of Moses here, he may be at a career low. I just, could you offer your political opinion on Moses' popularity in the people at this moment?
Oh, he's in an extraordinarily difficult position because when the people find out that they're going to be in the desert for 38 more years, that cannot fill them with joy in any sense because, like people who often go to nursing homes, they know that they're not coming out.
Yeah.
So the people are where they're going to die. in one form or another. And it exacerbates all the tension because, as we've seen already, it's not been a smooth journey. The people are beset with all sorts of physical problems: no water, no food, no meat. Um, they have been living in the wake of their slavery, which has colored their judgment. And I think it magnifies the problems that they see because the complaints that they register don't seem grounded in reality, but are a license for exaggeration, right? No one thinks of Egypt, whatever its agricultural bounty, to be a land flowing with milk and honey. It's a land that flows with the Nile.
Well, so you were remarking on the irony of what they describe. Why don't we'll talk about that in a second. But Jeremy, just want you to get you to weigh in on the if you were doing the survey here, if you were the Israelite here, what your is Moses at an all-time low, or can he only go up from here, or is he going to go further down here?
Well, my goodness, it's like Moses didn't have to deal with the constant polling that a contemporary politician has to deal with. Moses, yeah, with a plus or minus margin of error of 2.5%, you're polling at 32%. He's in a pretty bad spot, but you might ask yourself, people have for a long time noticed that this is one of those parade examples where you can maybe see the stitching that ties together some different biblical texts. Um, Datan and Aviram and Korach don't seem to have the same complaint. They've been kind of smushed together, but uh, the complaint of the Levites is that Moses and Aaron have excluded them. They're all, you're a Levite, we're a Levite. How come you're the boss? Everybody is holy, and that is certainly a very appealing piece of rhetoric to the, if you believe him, a very appealing piece of rhetoric to somebody grown up in modern North America. But uh, but don't Datan Aviram are members of the tribe of Reuven, the firstborn tribe, and who got displaced a couple of parshiot ago when Moses traded them out for Levite prominence. And so all I'm saying here is that Moses's leadership seems to be open to the complaint that you are putting yourself out there first, and you don't you seem to be putting you and your brother self-interestedly in leadership positions, and you've displaced the physical firstborns, which would be the common route back in ancient society, and you've displaced your fellow Levites, and the tribe of Reuven, who was the firstborn of the whole Israelites, gets displaced. So I think he's in a pretty low spot, partly because of what Barry said about the long journey ahead, but also partly because he's made himself vulnerable to the claim of self-dealing.
I just want to add one point to this, and there seems to be a complete failure on the part of the rebels to recognize that Moses and Aaron were chosen by God. They did not pick themselves. The rebels only want to concentrate on what they see, which is that Moses and Aaron have overstepped their bounds, and do not seem concerned at all with what God's point of view in this scenario might be.
Well, they're going to find out.
All right, so
Actually, that will be a cover up when they find out, I think.
the bare
One
bones
of
of the
the earliest
story is
covers up.
Korach and the cohort, 250 of his associates, Nisi'e Eda Kri'e Moed Anshe Shem. So machers, important people. Vayikahalu al Moshe, verse 3, they congregate against Moses, and they say, Madua titnasu al kal Adonai. Why are you, lording over the people of God? And Moses' reaction, Vayipol al panav, he falls on his face. I think we've commented on that in the past, where Moses, that expression, he falls on his face, leads to many, many different interpretation, including exasperation. Let's just fast forward. So they Moses challenges them to this, uh, an incense offering. They're to put incense, burning coals of incense in their fire pans, which itself is incense is a kind of volatile, quote unquote, radioactive substance in the Bible, and we know that terrible things can happen when incense is used not properly. And so it's very volatile material. Um, Moses summons Datan and Aviram to be part of it. They don't want to join. They've been fomenting this rebellion, and they decline from being present in the face-off. And then they claim, Hama'at ki elitanu me'eretz avat chalav udvash. You commented on you mentioned that before. Is it not bad enough that you took us out of the land flowing with milk and honey to to bring us to die in the desert? Lamitenu bamidbar ki tistarer aleinu gam yistarer, that you're going to lord over us. Af lo el eretz avat chalav udvash. You did not bring us to the land of milk and honey. Haviotanu. Vatiten lanu nachalat tzadeh v'charam. You didn't give us a field and a vineyard. Haine anashim ahem tenaker lo na'aleh. Are you going to gouge out our eyes like slaves that are still, indentured, and we're going to be permanently enslaved to you? And then it says here, they say, no, lo na'aleh, we're not going with you. Vayichar lo shemod. And this is the moment where this word vayichar is often understood as anger. Um, but I want to kind of just open the emotional range for Moses here and allow Moses to just kind of feel not only exasperated and maybe angry, but also grief. And the Midrash goes in that direction with Vayichar as opposed to Vayichar Af. Vayichar Af is anger, Vayichar as grief and terrible disappointment. And I'm wondering, is it to splice out all of the different emotions here, does it have any utility? Does it have any benefit to understand what Moses may be going through here? When the leader has this moment of, let's just say they are voting, the motion of non-confidence uh, has been put forward, um, and how is he reacting here? And is he right to take it personally, to feel aggrieved, or should he just be angry here? What do you think?
Well, he certainly, last week he certainly in Behalotecha, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I just can't bear this anymore. And God showed him a vision of shared leadership. Um, I'm not I'm not really busting on Moses's leadership here, but Yitro in Behalotecha, Moses says, I can't do this by myself. God says, buddy, you don't have to. I'm going to make 72 other prophets have some of your gift, and that's going to lighten the load on you. And the other people don't even quite understand this. Joshua says, we should arrest these people. And Moses says, no, no, this is the point. The point is to spread the prophecy throughout the whole community. And that Moses from Behalotecha is the guy who could relate to Korach's rhetoric. Again, I think there are plenty of reasons to think that Korach is only in it for himself and he's being demagogic and not really being sincere with his sort of democratic claims. But the guy who 2 weeks ago said the whole point is that everybody shares prophecy should be able to relate to Kulam Kedoshim Uvetocham Adonai. God is in the midst of everybody. And Korach's claim, I think, is that Moshe hasn't, maybe to smush the stories together in a way that's not necessarily the case. But I kind of want Korach to say, did you forget what happened 2 weeks ago? Or the Yitro thing, the Bahalota, we talked last time about did Yitro go? Did Yitro stay? Is the story of Yitro told out of order? But Yitro back in Exodus 18 has to tell Moses again, you really shouldn't do this all by yourself. You really should embark on a more horizontal governing structure. And again, Korach might not mean his lovely sounding rhetoric so sincerely, but you kind of gotta like a little bit of pro-democratic, everybody's holy rhetoric.
Barry, you
So
wanted to.
Korach is not really a Democrat in any meaningful sense of the word, because he's willing to take the Levitical perks that go with being a member of the tribe of Levi. He's not saying to the other 11 tribes, you guys all deserve to be Levites like us. He wants to be the Kohen, the head honcho. And I think that it's rather easy to see through him because he's not really speaking on behalf of the people. He's speaking on behalf of himself. He's a grifter.
I want to remark on one aspect of this, which is, you know, the leadership and political leadership, spiritual leadership, of course, also is a very there's a political aspect to this. Of course, you need a thick skin to function in a role and dissociate or at least be quite dispassionate when you make decisions, because often you're going to be criticized, and a person who is very sensitive to criticism not going to last really long in these roles. Um, and yet Moses is a human being, and like anyone in leadership, in political or religious leadership, we, and I'm going to include the three of us here, we've all been in positions where we have had, people criticize, and and it gets personal. And depending on how thick our skin is and how dissociated we are from the criticism, sometimes it can actually really hurt. And we don't need I don't need to go into examples of that. I'll give an example of another rabbi. I quoted this in my class this past week because I'm thinking about it. It was a very moving story. It was the late Rabbi Harold Schulweis, a very important rabbi in California, really one of our leading conservative rabbis of the last generation, who remarked about a family that experienced a terrible tragedy, and the family was yelling and screaming and railing against God and railing against him. And, where is God? And complete and total breakdown, and all of which is understandable in a moment of terrible grief, but they seem to have aimed a lot of their venom at him. You taught us, you this, you that, you and he's telling the story of this, and he says, I could not help but feel that I was being hurt. And I you know what, as professional as I am, they were hurting me too. And because and I, in sympathy for him, he was like, I'm invested in what I teach. I'm invested. I've been your rabbi for a whole generation. I've taught you over decades. Shouldn't you at least understand that what I've been teaching you, that it's complicated, that there are no answers to unanswerable questions, as we like to say. And how could I help but take it personally, he said. And I was very affected by him telling that story, because it came from the heart. It came from a person who was genuinely hurt. And we've all been there, I think, in some way, not necessarily in that particular example. So here is the community, here is a member of the community saying, without using vernacular here, you promised us one thing, you didn't deliver, and the promise that you made is so far-fetched from our reality now. It's better that we would go back, or the land that we left is the land of milk and honey, not the land that we're going to. That hurts. That's
You
painful.
know,
I think what
Winston
counts
Churchill
though
was
is
Wait,
Winston Churchill. led the United Kingdom through World War II, and at the very end of it, got voted out of office.
Yeah, that's going to happen. I mean, that happens. That's you know,
Moses is like,
At least President Roosevelt had the decency to die before the end.
to
but
die first, right? Moses, uh, he's led them out of Egypt. Well, it's perfectly fine for people to say, the problems that you led us through. And Moshe Rabbeinu dies. At least one way to look at it is that we needed a different kind of leadership out of Joshua. But yeah, Moses, I don't know. Maybe if you want to represent the divine, and at some level, a religious leader, while they should never have the hubris to think that they're, really God's representative on earth, but you do say, I'd like my professional life to be as a representative of this religion and to speak in its name. That is a major, it's quite a thing to say. At some level, I feel that I can speak in the name of Judaism. Maybe you have to take some of those arrows, and in the way that you imagine God absorbs people's anger and goes on too.
right. But it can be devastating. It can be very hurtful. Barry, go ahead now. Speak loud. Say it again. Say it again. Your mic clicked up.
What compounds the pain for Moses is repetition of rebellion are so wanting as leaders themselves. Moses
Wait,
compounds
Go ahead.
what compounds the pain for Moses, I think, is that the rebels are such deficient leaders. He would be happy to share his leadership with people who were worthy of it, even Eldad and Medad, since we were talking about Bahalotcha. But with Korach and Datan and Aviram, they're not good leaders. And that's why it's so painful for Moses, because he can't say that to their face. And so it's very hurtful what they're saying.
All right.
We
Yeah, go ahead.
we come from a tradition where we recognize that truth is not a defense against Lashon Hara, because that's the whole problem.
All right, let's take it to the next little scene there, and I know both of you wrote about this, or at least used this verse as the springboard for other thoughts. But we have chapter 16, verse 23. That you wrote on it for the Jewish Journal in Los Angeles, the table for five column. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God said to Moses, saying, "Daber el ha'ida lemor." Speak to the congregation, speak to the people. He'alumi saviv. Let everybody go up from around Mishkan Korach, Datan Aviram, from the dwelling area of Korach and Datan and Aviram. It's not the pasuk that we would choose from this parsha to offer commentary on. I mean, it's like, I appreciate that column because it kind of rolls the dice and come up with let's see where you can go with it. So where did you go with that? Jeremy, start with you.
Well, I noted that when the initial rebellion is described, the four names that we get are Korach, Datan, Abiram, and then another character called On ben Pelet. And On ben Pelet disappears because he initially was one of the rebels, but now when it comes time to uh, flee and keep your distance from the bad guys because they're going to get zapped and I don't want anyone else to get zapped, On Ben Pelet's name has fallen out. So there's in a section of Tractate Sanhedrin, which is a very long, agadic, exegetical, homiletical section. They said, "What happened to On?" And they say that Mrs. On persuaded him that this was a terrible idea. That he was. She uses a fairly kind of uh, self-interested rhetoric. She says, "Listen, you are middle management, you are support staff to Moses now, and if Korach wins, you're going to be support staff to him. You're not going to get anywhere, and so just cut out this foolishness. Actually, I would have preferred her to say, as Barry said a little earlier in the conversation, I would have preferred her to say, I think Moses has earned uh, the chance to go on leading because he's done so much and he's focused this community on important spiritual and moral purpose and don't violate that. That would have been a more elevating kind of answer, but uh, the one that she gives him is a little self-interested, but either way, even if it's not quite the ideal that I would have preferred, you get this really interesting story, which the Talmud extracts from between the lines, which is that this he is, so to speak, the missing character. Where did he go? His wife persuaded him that he was doing something foolish, and he listened to her. So one of the things that I like about that is that you can sort of get this story that it's a complete binary. Moses is a complete saint, and Korach is a complete Rasha. He's a complete scoundrel. And in reality, very few of us are saints, and very few of us are complete and total scoundrels. The On in that story is a guy who has a Yetzer Hara. He's got an inclination to do bad, and he can give it free rein. But then other people in his life, in this case, especially his wife, which is not the first maneuver in most Talmudic stories, his wife is wiser than he. And so he has a Yetzer Hara that makes him rebel, and a Yetzer Hatov that makes him listen to good advice from his wife.
Very nice. Barry, where did you go with that?
So the rebellion succeeds because it's a rebellion of words. That's the weapon of choice here. There is no army coming to attack Moses and Aaron. They're trying to have a political argument. And it struck me that there are two ways that a community can deal with a demagogue. One way is to isolate the demagogue, perhaps to imprison or even to kill him, the ultimate form of isolation. And the other is just to withdraw your support, because without the crowd behind them, they have nothing. They have empty words. And so it struck me that what the verse is saying is that you need to step back. And by stepping back, you're actually making a step forward to a resolution of the political problem posed by the rebellion.
Fascinating. I didn't write about this, but as you talk about it, both of you, you're obviously eliciting the story here, and I'm thinking cinematically in terms of how to, if you were putting this on the stage or putting it in, filming this, what would you do? What would be the direction here? And it's literally having the community move back. And the word misaviv, I'm going to take a cue from, the many places that it occurs in both the Torah and the rest of the Bible, um, and that it is sometimes associated with gevul, with boundary, and that what is happening here is that we're going to create a zone, the zone of destruction, basically, that moving the people back from a perimeter creates a zone, and in the zone here, some terrible things are going to happen. Namely, the earth is going to open up its mouth, um, and their people are going to fall inside. The world, the earth is going to kind of swallow them up alive here, and that they have to move away from the perimeter of the earthquake zone or the sinkhole zone. And as to exactly what happened here, um, I don't know. I was doing a little research on. I was thinking, like, what's the Jewish association with earthquakes? And here, this is trivia. I thought Richter Richter of the Richter scale was Richter Jewish? And the answer is no, he wasn't Jewish. But the Richter scale is actually the Gutenberg, should be called the Gutenberg Richter scale. And Gutenberg is Benno Gutenberg, who was a seismologist and is the mentor of Richter. And Benno Gutenberg was the one who suggested to Richter that you should put the scale on a logarithm chart, and that's how you got the Richter scale. Geves, go.
Okay.
There's a Jewish connection to everything. Okay, well, the people get swallowed up, and look, we also get absorbed in the story. I don't say we get swallowed up in the story, but we, you know, where does the story take us? How does the story end, basically?
Wait, before we walk away from this for
But
1 second, uh, where is it in Amos, right? Let's see here.
Yeah, 2 years before the earthquake.
Rush,
Yeah, let me
Rush,
find this.
almost 1-1.
Oh, it's just the beginning of Amos. Divrei Amos asher haya binokdim mitkoa asher chazal Yisrael. These are the words of Amos, who was in Nokdim near Tekoa, who prophesied on Israel bimei Uzziah melech Yehuda, ubimei Yeravam ben Yoash melech Yisrael, in the era of those kings, shnatayim lifnei harash, 2 years before the earthquake. And evidently there was in the 8th century BCE a big gigantic earthquake in the land of
Right.
Israel.
And I think it's mentioned in Zechariah also.
It is. It is a mention in Zechariah also. Look, we know that the land of Israel is on the Syro-African rift, prone to earthquakes. Many devastating earthquakes happened there. This event is taking place outside the land of Israel. But as to whether or not it is an earthquake or some other kind of manifestation, of course, it's all a miracle anyway.
By the
Um,
way, the Zachari case is interesting because Amos is a comparatively early prophet. He lives, before let's say the roughly 750 BCE or something like that. Zachariah, a comparatively late prophet, lives around, maybe 400 CE. And he says, and I had forgotten this, even though it's in Haftarah for I think the
like, oh, I don't know.
second day of Pesach, something like that. You will run away from the this valley where the earthquake is happening. The nastim kasher nastim mipnei harash, and you will run away as you ran away from the earthquake. Bimei Uziah melech Yehuda, in the days of Uzziah, the king of Judah. So, like you know that back in Amos's time, this thing really happened, and 300 years later, in Zechariah's time, they were still saying it will be like that earthquake. It's a cultural memory of that disaster. It's like, whatever. In 200 years, if Californians say it will be like the Northridge earthquake or
Big,
something like that.
big,
Well,
well,
even now they talk about the 1906 earthquake. That was over 100 years ago.
Yeah.
right. Well, we've felt the earth move under our feet many, many times here,
Now, she was Jewish.
and she was Jewish. That's your connection to earthquakes. We're gonna thank our viewers and listeners, our loyal viewers and loyal listeners, for watching and for listening. And we wish everyone a good Shabbat, hoping
Shabbat Shalom.
good things for Besorot Tovot, and we'll see you in
Sorrow
the
to
next
vote.
edition of Parsha Talk. Bye bye. Shabbat Shalom.